so the way this would play out though is we're not a white country. So you can't kick people out. Like, is there someone that you would, not for moral reasons, right? But is there someone you would, I don't want to use the word afraid, but that you would worry you about to debate?
Is it okay? Is there somebody?
So I'm not saying someone that's been accused of like murder or something. So ethically, you'd be like, I don't want to debate them.
But they're a very strong debater.
Yes.
To the point where like I would be like kind of nervous as to underperforming.
Yes.
I'm not. Look, I'm gonna have to think about it for a second. Not because there aren't people out there. I'm sure there are. Yeah. Look, I'll say it. I do think that he's an important voice in the space. And I agree with him on some things, but not all things. I know he not a big fan of libertarians from what I've heard. I think Andrew Wilson's a very strong debater.
He is.
He's a very strong debater, and I would debate him. I can't guarantee I'd win it.
Andrew's tough. He's a great debater. He's a lot of fun too. I love debating Andrew though, because Andrew does something that almost no one I debate does, which is he will immediately bite the biggest fucking shittiest bullet. Right? Like we were talking about gay marriage one time and shit, and he's like, look, do you agree that transgenderism and convincing kids of trans shit is like a grotesque evil that must be fought, like basically incredibly strong? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, then if I could draw a line from gay marriage to that, then shouldn't we reject gay marriage? And I said, okay, but what if I could draw a line from interracial marriage to gay marriage to that? Would you reject interracial marriage?
And he just bit it.
And he's like, yeah. And it's like, woof. Woof, that's a big woof, but it's like, hey, at least there's no hemming and hawing about it. Like, for me, the person that I would be very nervous to debate, and it's because of their skill, which they're probably better on their topic of choice than me, and because I think they're wrong in their conclusions, and I would hate to lose on an important issue that I think I'm right on. Do you know who Jared Taylor is?
He's the like a white nationalist, I think. Yeah, I know.
I think he'd smoke me.
I've heard him before. He's like super calm and like super
smart and insane
and racist.
And I mean, and it's like like a lot of the white nationalists. The problem is they correctly identify a problem, like of anti-white sentiment. It's the solution that's fucked up, right? The solution is like, well, then country only for white people, and it's like there's so much, right? Like there's just so much, like. Well, if other races get to do it, why don't we? Yeah.
Yeah, but our position is that nobody should be doing it, right? Like,
well, is it? Yeah. Do you think that?
Position.
Do you think the Japanese should have to open up their country to non-Japanese?
Well, so what I mean, yes, I think, and this is we're getting into this will take too long.
Right, I know, yeah.
We probably. I'm probably a lot more libertarian when it comes to like the immigration,
sure,
than the kind of the current Trump administration, and I'm guessing your opinion as well when it comes to immigration. Mm-hmm. But for me, in the U.S., I tend to approach things with like a colorblind approach. I agree that white people are expected to do that when nobody else is expected to do that in the U.S. context. My principle is, well, I think everybody should be expected to do that, not okay, well, let's be racist too. Like that's like the direction I want to go with things.
Well, I think that I look at it this way, right? Where it's like like I said, I'm probably less libertarian than you on a lot of the immigration issues, but I don't have a problem. I think the government exists for the benefit of the people that are here. And so if that government decides those people here don't want anyone else to come into our country, at least with permanent residency or citizenship, our immigration system should be geared expressly towards the benefit of our people. And if that means bringing in a bunch of people from India because it helps the country as a whole, it's great. But if that means not letting anyone in from the rest of the world, also great. The problem, so the way this would play out though is we're not a white country. So you can't kick people out, right? You can't. But if you were a country that was homogenous, I guess I would have to say you should be entitled to the same shit, which would mean if you say overarchingly, we don't want people, or our country doesn't want people of a certain religious ideal because we think that it's fucked up, that I guess you would have the right to say that. But it's irrelevant here because you can't kick people out that have already been made roots here. Now, illegal immigration's differently because they knew that it was illegal, et cetera, et cetera. But how do you look at a fourth generational black guy? You can't. There is no circumstance that that's a legitimate concern. Well,
There's
there's one.
also
There's one, and what this is what Jared Taylor says. He says that we basically enclave, right? So that whites, his people would be like, we will agree to have these 3 states, and only the people we want will be here, and blacks will do the same, and the people that want to mix will do the same. Now, the problem is, you, as a libertarian, you're probably aware of this. The problem immediately is the practicality of that.
Yeah, it would require
Okay,
deportations
yes.
from one state to another, basically.
My neighbor, who's a black guy, now has to be kicked out of his home because Pennsylvania
Yeah.
went to the Latinos, and I'm in some shitty Portland or some shit. You know what I mean? Like, instantly, it's fucking unworkable and bullshit. But the general principle, I get where the white nationalists are coming from, in the sense of they have a valid criticism. They have a fucked up solution. That's the problem. And I don't treat them like monsters, because I feel the same about a black nationalist. You have every right, man. You have every right to fucking point out there are legitimate problems in black communities that oftentimes aren't faced by other guys. I would be a fucking asshole to say, you don't have a right to say, I'm representing my people, I'm concerned about my people, but you don't get your own country. You don't even get reparations, in my opinion. Like, right, you know what I mean? But you have every right to fucking band together and say, so
you could have freedom of associate. Like, I do think the First Amendment provides a level of freedom of association where if you want to form your own club within your own household, or have your own club, etc., that's fine, right? Like the black nationalists, they want to form their own thing. Like, I'm under First Amendment protections. I think that the government would be wrong to go in and break up the Black Hebrew Israelites and the Klan, right? You can't do that. You can't go in and say you're not allowed to associate with each other anymore. That's
and if you want to buy a bunch of land and put up a bunch of houses with you and your community, fine. The problem is on the public property.
Which is what Jared Taylor kind of wants, yeah.
Right. You can't fucking say that people can't be there based on race.
Yeah.
So if there's public
100%.
roads going through your community, tough shit. Yes, you could buy the whole city block, but you can't do shit about the public areas, right? And it's like, and the other problem is, obviously, I promise a lesson. The other problem is, obviously, I don't give a fuck if someone looks like me. I give a fuck more if they are compatible with me socially and culturally. So I would happily live next to a black guy who thinks like me more than a white guy that wants fucking trans education for my children, blah, blah, blah. What's the skin color matter? You say, well, the generalities show that black people are less likely to have that. Fine, but that's the problem with stereotypes. Stereotypes are good and useful. But when you make things based on general knowledge, which is in effect what a stereotype is, when you get more specific knowledge, you dispense with the general knowledge. So if you think all tall people are good at basketball, but then you see a tall guy who's absolute dog shit, you don't say, no, he must be good because he's tall. You say, oh, now I know he's not tall. If you think that all black people are crazy liberals, the LGBT, blah, 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 and then you meet a guy who's just like you, taking his family to church, fucking hardworking son of a bitch, whatever. Why do I have a problem with that guy? Now, I don't have a problem with black people, but you see my point. That's what I said to the white nationalists.
It's ideology, right? The question is one of ideology. Like, there's other things that, like, sometimes people will use race as a proxy for, but the reality is, like, you and I are concerned about the actual things that matter, I think, right? Which is how much are you contributing? Like, are your value sets going to be aligned with the kind of future that I want to create, which is, one that emphasizes personal liberty, and et cetera. I think Jared Taylor, though, his ideas like that, I think I remember I did see a clip one time where I think he specifically said, like, I wouldn't care if it led to like a decline of like GDP or like an increased crime rate or whatever along the lines. Like, this is the thing that's important to me. Like, I just want to have an ethno state. And it's like, I just can't wrap my head around that. Like the things that all these things that matter, I think for very, very, for reasons that make so much sense, right? Like, you want to live in a good area. Like, why is race the thing now that you, I don't know. Again,
it's got,
there are preferences, I guess, but I just don't share them.
It's kind of iffy for you though, right? Because, like, I don't know about you personally, but I've listened to sort of Fabian Scott talk about like what his society would look like. And in that society, right, couldn't theoretically a bunch of people come together and say, this is it's like a HOA. It's all white people, whites only.
We're
the governing body here.
My position on this is that the state has no basis to discriminate based on race. But if a bunch of people under the First Amendment, freedom of association, if they want to go like band together and form some, building or group or compound somewhere where they live the life that they want to live, as long as they're following, they're not infringing upon other people. I disagree with them. I'm not going to join that compound, right? But they should have the right to exist without the force of the state being applied to them. That's my opinion.
I would love to hear like Liquid Zulu or someone talk with Jared Taylor, because I think weirdly enough, for completely opposite reasons, there'd be a lot of overlap, right? I don't think Fabian Scott or Liquid Zulu would be like, yay, white country, right? But they'd probably be like, yeah, you have the right to freedom of association, and we want to disband the government. And once that government, the state's disbanded, if you choose to band together and as property owners, you have the right to say what happens on that property and fuck off.
And by the way, everybody agrees with this concept on like a lower unit level, right?
Of course.
So like everybody would agree, even though we wouldn't agree like on with the racist opinions, right? Who says I don't want, let's say I don't want white people into my house, right? I'm not going to force white people into his house, and I don't think anybody wants that, right?
Right. It's but that's why I don't want to debate him. Do you understand? Like, because even the libertarian tendencies in me, I'm like I'm against it. Don't get me wrong. Before this gets clipped, it was like, Rob's a Jared Taylor fan. I'm not saying it. I think that he's incredibly cordial and polite, and I would debate him. I would. But I'll tell you what, I'd be biting my fingernail. I would.
Well, I don't think so. I think that debating him might be actually kind of easy, because you would start with the premises of like, look, like what's this debate purpose? It's not about like you're like a monster, or that I think that you should be allowed to do what you do. It's from a place of confusion. Like, why is this the value system here when there's all these other things that are so much more important? Here's how I can show that they're important, and maybe run through some hypotheticals.
That's what I would do. But he would be like, well, as long as you think I have the right, that's all I give a shit about. But I don't. But I'm not an ANCAP, so I'm not calling for the dissolution of the United States government. So I'm like, you don't have the right. You don't. But the ANCAP would say, yeah.
The ANCAP would say potentially, but I'm not advocating for the dissolution of the U.S. government either. And the U.S. government, again, should approach everything in a colorblind manner.
So it's easier for me. But that's why I would do the debate. I would do just fine. I assure you I would. I debated Richard Spencer, who was not, I don't think he's a bad debater, but I don't think he's as good as Jared.
I don't know what his belief set. Like, he seems to change it every other year. Like
I think I don't think he's up front. I think he's an accelerationist, is what I think. Okay. I could be wrong. Okay. But I remember, I remember there's a small town where I'm from, right, called Brookville. And I remember when I was like 11 years old, or a little older than that, maybe 14, my grandpa was in a nursing home there. It was like 20 minutes from where I grew up. And we drove through one day, and there's a big traffic jam. Very small town, very small. And I was like, what's going on? And my dad's like, oh, look at this. And there's the KKK. They're on the court steps. And there's like 6 of them. And there's a bunch of people booing them on the sidewalk or whatever, like dozens booing them and whatever. And as you're stopped at the light, they're like trying to hand you literature. Like, fucking, moving on. And I remember seeing all those people booing them. And it was the first time I ever really thought about that. And within 3 minutes, it took me to get this thought. It was like, whatever those people really believe, they should just pretend the opposite. Because most people would say, fuck those guys no matter what. So if they really wanted Trump to win, they'd be like, yay, Kamala. Vote Kamala. You know what I mean? I think that's a lot of Richard Spencer. Because I could be wrong though, because Richard Spencer's like, yay Democrats, yay Biden, right? And so, but I don't think that he truly is saying I'm taking the opposite side on purpose. I think that's part of it, but I think he's like, let's get this shit kicked off. Let's just make it as shitty as possible, as fast as possible, so then people will eventually realize that we're right. And I think that he is pulled back from his white nationalism. He claims he's not one now. I suspect that that's not true. I suspect that he realizes the utility in claiming that he's not. When I talked to him, he was celebrating his new philosophy based on Apollo, the Roman god called Apolloism. I did not understand it. I took that debate with one purpose, and that was to get him as many times as possible to say, yep, the Democratic Party aligns with my values more. Thank you very much. I got him to say
clip, put it on Twitter.
That's it, man. That was it. I was like, sounds good to me. I was willing to talk about other shit, but it was like 2 shifts passing and there was a lot of audience questions, and the majority of the audience were his supporters, and they were like, well, what would Apolloism say about this? And I'm just like, the fuck is this? But he was pleasant to debate. I'll just say it was not. And that's one of the things a lot of those people have, and I think it probably leads to more people supporting them than otherwise would have, because they seem charming. So